Hello, people. Andrew here, talking about comics from a reader, collector, speculator, investor point of view, in that order of importance to myself. Today I'm talking about Marvel's event, Civil War, that ran from 2006 to 2007. Right off the bat, I'll talk about whether or not it's worth to read, and the answer is yes. And there are two reasons that I say that, even before we go into the story. And the first reason is the artwork by Stephen McNiven. It is great. I think it's an excellent depiction of all the heroes. He has facial expressions and body posture so that you can actually identify different characters even when they're outside of costume, just from these things alone. His style is very crisp, it's very clean. The menacing shots are menacing. The battle scenes, which there are a fair amount of them, they're easy to understand and follow. You don't get lost in the melee, even though there's like a ton of stuff going on. The book was delayed a little bit towards the tail end of it because he needed a little bit more time to finish, and it's well worth the wait. He did an excellent job of illustrating the series, and it's worth it alone just for that. The second reason is because whether you like the story or not, the event had repercussions throughout the Marvel Universe for many years to follow. Some people still refer back to this, and again, it was part of a template for one of the Captain America films as well. So it's an important event in Marvel's history that has some resonance. So for those two reasons alone, I would recommend reading this. But as far as if you're not concerned about any of that, the history or the artwork isn't the thing, and is it just a good read for that? And I still say yes. It has its issues and it does have its problems. But I found myself just reading it recently that sometimes I was getting angry or even anxious for somebody or saying, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, even though I know the story. Anything that's going to elicit that kind of an emotional response from the reader is a good read. Again, good or bad, but I mean, it did bring out emotions from me, and so for that reason alone, again, I would recommend it. What is the story about? Ultimately, it comes down to a story between what are you willing to sacrifice, your security or your freedom. In this situation, a group of young heroes, the New Warriors, they're doing a reality show and they're filming things, and they discover a band of four villains that are wanted, and they decide that they're going to corral these four villains on live TV. And unfortunately, things go bad. One of the villains is actually a very strong villain by the name of Nitro, and the conflict escalates to the point where he uses his primary power, which is to blow himself up and everything around him. He's able to reconstitute and become, Nitro again, but those around him, they're pelted with shrapnel and the force blast, and the blast itself ends up killing over 600 people, including a whole gaggle of children from the schoolyard next door. And this sets out a public outrage that something has to be done about the superhero, which is kind of strange because it's not the hero that did the wrong thing. I mean, maybe yes, they needed to take this somewhere else, and it was a bad plan to try and grab these guys when they're so close to civilians, and maybe wait till they make a move outside of town or something. So I get that, but it's a Nitro's the one that caused all of this mayhem and destruction. These people were trying to do somewhat of a job in corralling escaped villains. Nonetheless, there's an outrage against superheroes, and the Superhero Registration Act comes into effect, which basically means that you have to give up your secret identity to the government and list your powers. Now, if that's where it stopped, I would be okay with that. I would be okay with that idea that you've got to register your name and your powers. And if anything, I would have the government or the legal force or whatever, they'd assign some sort of detective task, so that, because when crimes are committed, if there's discrepancies or the oddities, you'd be able to say, oh, well, this one looks like it might have involved teleportation. What do we got in the way of teleportation? Let's go through our data banks and find out who does that sort of thing and see if anybody was around town and do bring them in for questioning. I get that. And in fact, there should be a detective group, much like Powers by Brian Michael Bendis and Michael Avon Oming, with their two detectives, Christian Walker and Dina Pilgrim. A great series, which I'll talk about some other time. But yes, these are two detectives, and their primary objective is to track down superheroes and superhero crimes. Anyways, sort of off topic there. So we get down to this question of, are you going to, register or not register? And as I say, if it was just a register, that would be fine. But it seems to be a little bit more heavy-handed than that. And again, it's not clearly defined, which is a bit of a weakness in the story itself, what exactly the Superhero Registration Act is. Sometimes it's called Superhuman Registration Act as well. So what are we talking about here? Because it goes, the idea you seem to get is that you register with the government, and now you're a federal employee working for SHIELD, doing what they say when they say to do it, becoming part of this new project called the Initiative and being stationed somewhere in one of the 50 states. That's a different call than just registering your powers. That's a form of conscription. And Captain America is against that and stands against Tony Stark, who is for that. So Tony Stark represents the security, the Big Brother security type of idea, and Captain America is more of the personal freedoms and liberties. So it becomes a conflict between these two. Now, it escalates fairly quickly, and I was surprised by a number of the choices from the pro-registration side. I'm just going to go through some of these covers. There was 7 of them altogether. And I will mention that there was variants, not the same way that we get variants now, where you would have 25 different variants and you would have images that have nothing to do with the Civil War. But there were some variant covers as well, usually from a different company. Like the Dynamic Forces has a cover, but they're not like a lot of different images, just different branding to a sense. So what happens is that it develops into a point where the pro-registration side attacks the superhero, the pro-freedom side, with absolute vehemence. It's startling at how vehement they go after the heroes. It almost seems like more of a crime to be a hero than to actually be a criminal committing a crime. They attack these guys with great fervor, and it's not just the attacking all of the heroes and rounding them up. Once you are rounded up and you've disagreed and you say, I'm still not going to sign this registration thing, they throw you into a lockup pen in the negative zone for an indeterminate amount of time. If you never say, I will register, well, then you're a criminal for life, and therefore you will forever be locked up in the negative zone. Does that seem a little extreme? It seems a little extreme to me. And there was that extreme. And there was some characters, one of the angry parts that I got about it was I got angry with Reed Richards because he was a decent character. He's still a decent character. But I didn't like his attitude towards it. He was pro-registration, and he just treated this whole hero community, people that he's known and he's worked with and who have done great deeds, and he has no qualms about just sealing them away forever. They might as well be encased in amber if they're going into the negative zone. So the battle rages between the two sides. Until you get to your end result on issue number 7, and then some other follow-ups beyond that. It is a good read. I enjoyed it, as I said, a lot of emotions and stuff. So there was a number of tie-ins with this book as well. I did a sort of a rough count, because there are books that are not included in the official Civil War but have Civil War ties to it. There are some books that lead into it and some individual series. There's probably over 100 different books that tie into the Civil War. That's a lot of reading. Is it necessary to read all of those books to get the full Civil War story? And I would say no, because I've just read the seven and I get the idea what it's about. The other ones would be accent points and give a little bit more depth to the characters, which is one of the complaints I have read, is that there's not enough character development. There's the main characters, which are Captain America and Iron Man. They certainly get enough airplay in here, but some of the other secondary characters, they don't have enough to do. But that's going to happen in a series that's this big that involves so many characters. So yeah, off the top, definitely worth a read. What about collecting, speculating, investing, any of that sort of thing attached to the Civil War? Well, the thing is, there were no major new characters. So when there are no new major characters, the speculation is not going to be high on any of these books. There are some significant deaths, but again, that doesn't seem to have as much resonance, because in a Marvel universe, you can come back from death quite regularly. So that doesn't seem to strike anything. And some strong reveals as well. Spoiler here, but it's not really a spoiler, is that Spider-Man himself reveals himself as Peter Parker. And if I did spoil it for you, I'm sorry about that. But all of these events, it's just part of the story, but they don't seem to have any strong speculation appeal. I would imagine that even though it's a great, it is a good story, but it's not that expensive. I'm not sure that you would be able to find this in the dollar bins. You might find a scattered issue here or there, one that's in less than a 9.0. Most of the books will be in a 9.0 or better, because people at this time in the 2006, they were buying and bagging and boarding these books right away. Hard to find a weaker copy. So I think you could still find some of these books in the dollar bin. All of this sort of supplementary stuff, of which I say there's a number of tie-in titles and what have you. I'm finding all of this stuff that you're about to see in the dollar bins. But the main story itself, it may cost you a little bit more, but not a lot more. I would not pay more than $5 per issue. It just doesn't have that kind of value attached to it. And if you're strictly just interested in the story, you can get yourself the trade paperback or read it online. I don't do too much of that, but so yeah, and the fallout from the Civil War itself, like what happened from it, a number of things. Again, this is a reason to read it, especially if you're interested in the Marvel Universe. A number of different events happened from it. We got, as much as it's hated, the Spider-Man One More Day story was born out of the Civil War. We also saw a couple of new Avengers books, the Mighty Avengers and the Avengers The Initiative. They came out of this series as well. The Fantastic Four, Sue and Reed tried to reconcile and rebuild their marriage, and so they left the book for a while and were replaced by the Black Panther and Storm, which was an interesting quartet as well. So, and Iron Man became the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Mariah Hill was demoted. So a number of factors happened within or as a repercussion from Civil War. The whole Dark Reign series sort of, well, actually that was a little bit later. That came after Secret Invasion. But it was a good series. It had a lot of resonance within the Marvel Universe. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I recommend it as a read. As far as collecting is concerned, it's a Marvel event, so if you're into those sort of things, you can collect it for that. The artwork by Stephen McNiven, it's written by, I forgot to mention, Mark Millar. So if you like his material, it's a good read based on that as well. You are probably, whatever character that you like, you're probably going to find somewhere in this whole series that character has shown up. so you can track them. I don't think the man thing makes it in here. I don't think that too many of the horror characters make it in here, but pretty much all of the superhero community is mentioned in here, so it has a lot of collecting value for that. Even these covers, you can collect the whole Civil War run, and as I said, it's going to be this 7 issues plus another 100 or so other issues that are attached to it. And that would be a sizable collection, but it's might be worth checking out and trying to do that. As far as speculation and grading, I would not suggest either one of them. It's a good story, but it's not going to have a lasting financial impact. At least I don't see it that way. Just because there isn't a lot of new and introductory things that happened. No brand new artifacts, no brand new characters. Just a good, solid story that you're going to like it or you're not. That's how it goes. I particularly liked it, and I would recommend it. And I recommend it not just for the history and the artwork, but also because I think the story was good. It did have an emotional impact. That's what I got to say about Civil War, and I'll talk to you later. Be good to one another.